What does it mean to believe in something? To believe simply means to act as if whatever you believe exists. Everyone must believe in something. The world is full of too many unknowns to avoid it. We go about our days dependent on these structures to guide and shape our perceptions. This map is a kind of collective memory built by those whom you will never see. And we too are molding and shaping these structures in semi-permanent ways by which we will impart onto future generations. But as imperfect creatures, we often mismanage our own map, either because we fail to read it correctly or because we fail to accurately construct the geography of modernity onto it. Speaking as an individual, no matter how much care and attention I place towards reading and encoding my worldviews, I always make errors. My life feels like a cacophony of failure, graced ever so often with the illusion of success, if only to make my shortcomings contrast evermore. When I arrive at a tolerable understanding of my own will, my purpose, and whatever assurances I believe in, life always points out new recesses I have yet to explore, which were ironically laid bare by conclusions I had moments before thought impregnable. And that leads me back into the valley, where the only way out is to wrestle with questions the sane would rather leave unknown. I ask myself, what is my purpose? Why am I here? Why do I have morals, and what determines what is right and what is wrong? Where do we go when we die? Is everything already set in stone? Do I have free will, and if so, how free am I? How many decisions are my own, and of the ones I am not responsible for, who is? Why should the life of a stranger be worth any less than my own to my eyes? Why does anything exist at all? What is time, and how do you mark a beginning before there is even a canvas? What is the probability that the way I experience the world is objective opposed to subjective to my own survival? Is everything explainable by machines, and if so, can I describe the universe as a set of syllogisms? Why do I feel so alone? Is it possible to ever really understand someone? And what is my purpose? And what is my purpose? Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, I cannot answer any of these questions for you. That is a journey you will have to walk alone. But I believe I have answered some of these questions for myself, and I would like to share my discoveries with you. Before we dive off the deep end, I need to cover a few things. This is not a debate. I am not making arguments for what is true, nor am I attempting to claim any other view is incorrect. This is a story, a narrative describing my own wandering and conclusions I inevitably came to. Conclusions I believe many have come to after their own odyssey. Please do not think of this as anything more than it is, and please treat my words with the authority they deserve, which is to say, none at all. It's not a debate, it's a story. What is my purpose, and why am I here? There are essentially three conclusions to draw from this question. The first is, you believe there is no answer to the question of meaning or purpose. The second, you believe there is an answer to these questions, but you're not sure what it is, and you're not sure if anyone knows what it is. The third option, you believe there is an answer to this question, and you know what the answer is. I find myself in the third camp. I am entirely too afraid to choose the first option. That leaves so many holes in my worldview that I would cease to function. I'm not in the second camp because I am brave enough to seek the third camp. I cannot prove to you that any one of these options are true, but I will attempt to give you permission to seek the third option. In my search for meaning, I seriously considered 3 routes. The first, for this modern age, is science, then philosophy, then religion. In no particular order, and at the same time, but for the sake of clarity, I will make a case for all 3 individually. What is science? I'm afraid science is not the phone you're using or the composition of a star, nor is it the neurons in your brain or the gravity keeping you steadfast to the earth. Science is not a thing or a field, it's a process. A limited process that excels precisely because of its limitations. Using evidence expressed in the language of mathematics, science is a process of gathering information through observations which are then tested to form conclusions which can predict interactions, indefinitely refining our knowledge of the physical world. Science is equipped to answer all sorts of questions, but I fear there is a class it cannot answer.
Thought experiment time.
Every time I play a key on a piano, a light bulb flashes. After careful observation, I discover that the hue of the light bulb reflects the note that I play on the piano, and the intensity of the light reflects the intensity in which I strike the keys. If I play chords on the piano, the light shows a corresponding composition of waveforms. Eventually, I get to the point where I can perfectly predict and model how the light will respond to the piano, yet after generating a perfect model, science fails to answer a very basic question. Why does the light turn on when I play the piano? Of course, one can easily invent a reason as to why this happens, and throughout history, many of the most successful discoveries in science were made precisely off of an invented reason. The math did not math, and so someone decided to add in a variable that made it work. Think of Einstein's cosmological constant. This has happened many times throughout history, but that process is not science. It's conjecture that so happened to be correct. Moreover, how can science describe the things we cannot observe? Please show me the formula for love or the equations for hate. Where is the particle for joy? And how could science possibly show? The rain falls quietly on an uneventful autumn day. Restricted to the indoors, I find myself lost in the hearth, my mind drifting to a time long since past. I was a young man in those days. I should have been full of dreams and aspirations, but instead I was broken. I had just started college, fresh off a breakup that was no one's fault, yet hurt all the more because of it. In that moment, I failed to guard against my own weakness and began to wonder if it was worth it to cherish someone as deeply as I had her, if it were ever possible to feel this way again. That there is no escape from a dread caused by a hope with no evidence. I am cut off from the memory as my lifelong partner and friend enters the living room, cup of tea in hand, and retires to her chair just like every other day. Her mere presence reassures me in a way only she can that it is brave to hope with no evidence. And now, with wisdom only attainable with time, I recognize what a gift it was to live, if but for a brief moment in agony, if only to understand how precious the life I now lead really is. After all that, we have still failed to address the most damning aspect of science. The myriad of assertions one must make about the world in order to practice it. Before you can ever practice science, you have to accept the world is rational or that it can be understood. You have to assume that everything works the same way everywhere, and the physics of your laboratory are the same at every other point and time in the universe. You have to assume causality and that there is even a world outside of your mind. You must assume your senses are reliable, as scientific instruments are merely extensions of those senses. You must assume that events that are occurring now will continue to occur in the future. There are arguably an innumerable number of assumptions one must uphold as true before you can begin to even utter the words scientific method. All of these assumptions have evidence, but there is no concrete proof. I would argue that the human mind makes basically the same number of a priori conclusions before you can even approach any realm of understanding, no matter the domain, that being science, philosophy, and finally the religious. Please understand that this does not make science any less true or even less useful. In fact, it is because science cannot answer the why question that it is capable of answering the how. Science is a brilliant tool, and it should not be discounted, but just as you cannot make light from darkness, you cannot make meaning from science. My goal is not to cripple science, but instead to give you permission to pursue other routes. If one has to make assumptions no matter what, why should you only look to science for questions of meaning? Would it not be best to look at other avenues if they prove to be more insightful? What is the case for philosophy as a tool to discover meaning? In other words, can one obtain a reason to exist from one's own philosophy? Perhaps you could be a utilitarian and believe the best actions are the ones with the best outcomes. Or perhaps you ascribe to deontology and believe the greatest calling is to follow rules, principles, and morals regardless of the outcome. Maybe you simply believe in being a good person without all of the dogma of religion. Perhaps you believe that actions are good if they are good for yourself, thus your purpose is to make sure the individual is the most successful. Perhaps the greatest calling is to preserve society as it currently stands. I am aware of how simplistic I made all of these ideas to seem. Please understand that each of these principles are extremely complex and enticing, and this is not anywhere near the complete list of philosophical notions of morality. I'm not trying to strawman the argument for philosophical solutions. I'm confident that many of you have found meaning from one of these very paths. But I cannot, for a simple reason. Every idea I have ever encountered pertaining to philosophical notions of moral relativity are destroyed by one simple question. Good and bad in comparison to what? If I say it is morally acceptable to act in one way and morally reprehensible to act in another, what am I using as a scale? I tried for many years to generate a polarity of morality based on the most common social trends throughout history. And though there are assuredly patterns and basic principles that all cultures share, they are different enough at the bedrock that I could not form a comprehensive polarity from culture alone. From my readings, there are basically two reasonable arguments to avoid the problem of scale. There are many more, but I find these two the most enticing. The first is to say there is no scale, that moral landscape is a consequence of culture. There is no such thing as good and bad. And to those individuals I ask, why are you still alive? If there is no meaning at all to existence and no action is any better or worse than another, why put up with anything in the first place? If there is no good to love and no bad to suffering, then why do anything at all? Maybe you say, living is enough, but now you've created a hierarchy of which living is at the top, and by your own reasoning, such hierarchies do not exist in reality. The other way out is to say we can simply make our own scales, become the Superman, but I deem this task impossible, only because it is impossible to generate a scale that is anything but your mere whim. And if you say that it is not your mere whim and that you feel called to deem some actions as good and some as bad, then you're not making the scale. Whatever it is that called you is making it. To some of you, I'm sure that generating morals based on a mere whim is good enough, and if that is, I am glad for you, but unfortunately for me, that is not enough. I do not think philosophy has the ability to generate morals. It's a brilliant tool to compare different structures and generate grounded logical reasons for why we value the principles we value, but it is unable to actually generate said values. I love philosophy, and I believe everyone has a responsibility to be a philosopher. After all, philosophy simply means to love wisdom. And don't we all agree it's virtuous to be wise? After this realization of the limits of science and philosophy, that left me with my final option: religion. I cannot prove to you that one religion is the answer to our question of meaning, nor can I prove to you that any one specific religion is better or more true than any other. By mechanistic means, the furthest I can get with any amount of reasoning is to prove to myself that it is not silly to believe in religion. You have to have faith in religion just as you have to have faith in science, just as you have to have faith in philosophy. Nothing is proven, and if I must have faith in something, I choose to have faith in the thing that will answer some of these questions. With that being said, I am not going to attempt to prove one religion over any others. Mostly because I am incapable of doing so, but also because it's a waste of time. I believe for my own sake that if one is looking for the truth, they will find it. And if they are not looking for the truth, no amount of evidence will ever convince them, so why bother? As such, after a thorough examination of all the major world religions, I arrived at the Christian account for Yahweh for a very simple reason. Christianity, by my estimation, is the only one of the major world religions to solve the problem of justice with mercy. I am an imperfect creature, thus I require mercy to measure up to a calling to be perfect, which all the major world religions require. To me, that seems hopeless, but I also feel that the gods should be consistent. I do not wish to believe in deities that control the cosmos who are just as broken and temperamental as I am. That would be a disaster. But how do you have mercy without compromising justice? Christianity solves this problem in a beautiful way. It upholds justice with no exception, and at the same time is merciful to those who believe. All the major world religions have to contend with this problem, and they all attempt to solve it in their own unique ways. I simply found the Christian solution most appealing. I'm going to briefly go through all of the major world religions and their stance on justice and mercy. Please understand that this is not anywhere close to a complete description, and remember, I'm telling a story. I'm not trying to prove anything. Within Judaism, there is no concept of heaven. The prophets of old do not go to join Yahweh. They go into the ground just like everyone else because they are imperfect. There is no way to make up for this error. All justice, no mercy. Within Islam, there are civic actions permitted against the unbeliever that are not permitted against those who believe. Moreover, all but one chapter of the Quran start with the same mantra. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Here we have mercy at the cost of justice. Buddhism upholds karma, a strict system of consequence that demands perfect practice. Compassion saves us from the suffering of life, but does not remove you from the greater system of karma. You must still work all the same to achieve enlightenment. Here we have all justice with no mercy. Out of all the world religions, Hinduism was the most difficult for me to understand as a Western member of society. To some, Hinduism is a religion, and to others, Hinduism is a way of life. But like Buddhism, it follows a similar concept of karma with the added complexity of dharma, or the balance of good and evil. Like Buddhism, you must follow this system to a T, and there are even structures in place to enforce the balance of good and evil. Hinduism, like Buddhism, is a system of justice at the expense of mercy. In Christianity, we have, in my view, the best solution. No one is perfect, therefore everyone is deserving of punishment. But that punishment is enacted on Jesus, the one who took the place of humanity. Everyone is deserving of death, no matter if you believe or not. Thus, you are to treat everyone the same, because no one is perfect. But there is a free choice to anyone, no matter the class or race, which is offered the same. In my view, this is the only solution available to all peoples that allows for much needed mercy without compromising justice. Once again, please understand I am aware this is a vast oversimplification of all these practices, but to give all of these religions an appropriate explanation would take a lifetime. I'm not trying to prove anything, I am simply telling a story, and I feel this amount of specificity is enough to express my reasoning. If only that were the end. Just because I believe I found truth, that does not mean I completely understand it. Events happen every day that force me to question. I still find myself in the valley, and I still have to claw my way out. If anything, I now have more questions than I did before, but I've also gained a set of propositions I do not doubt. My purpose is to love the Lord God with all my heart, soul, and mind. Morality exists, and it is possible to uphold it. I value the life of all humans because I, like them, was created in the image of God. I know where I go when I die, and I have the freedom to choose my way or His. I believe there is something more fundamental than time or physics, and I know there is a limit to mechanistic thinking. The world is defined by words, after all. It is possible to live a good life, and I am called to do just that. But maybe tomorrow I will wake up and say it's a false hope. Maybe it's untrue. Maybe I'm just lying to myself. But isn't it better to hope at all than to give up because of the terror of a hope misguided? To wake up and realize it was all for naught. I refuse to let that fear paralyze me until the day I know with all evidence there is nothing, and all is for naught. I still question every day, and I fear that it's all made up, but I still place my faith, the evidence of that which is unseen, in God. Not at the expense of science or philosophy, but for it. I'm guessing many of you at this point may be protesting, saying that this decision is closed-minded and dogmatic, and it may be dogmatic, but closed-minded I think not. In fact, it is because I am now grounded that I can seriously consider perspectives that would simply wash me away just a few years ago. I have been freed to entertain vastly more ideas without the risk of system collapse. Getting to a point where you are convinced by a few core ideas is not permission to stop thinking. It is the safety net that allows you to seriously consider topics that would have suffocated you before. I believe many people make the mistake of falling into a set of beliefs and no longer putting forth the effort to clarify anything outside of their own understanding. If you have gleaned anything from this account, I hope that you have given yourself permission to strive for a belief in something. Everyone has to believe in something, whether that be in any of the realms, and I hope that after this brief explanation, you have given yourself permission to pursue an understanding by any means, not just the ones that are colloquially accepted. Thank you.